Okay, welcome in one and all. I'm now going to be doing my reviews for week 12 of the NFL season. Hard to believe we're already this far into the year, and it's just a matter of time before we're talking about playoffs. That's just over like 2 months away. So here we go. I'll do a full recap of week 12. What I'm going to be doing, just like I always do, is go through the teams that I did predict would win, who actually won, and the scores of that game, and the records of the teams, respectively. So this past Thursday, we had three games on tap with the Thanksgiving in the States, and that's like a tradition that they do every year. The one thing I did like, especially this year, is that all the games were divisional, and that's a big thing for me is divisional games because those games are very key into playoff positioning at the end of the year. So the first matchup, as you can see with the two teams on your screen, happened between the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. I did predict that Detroit would get the victory because they were coming into this matchup as the better team, but unfortunately, they were not able to get the victory. I believe it's like a curse for the Detroit Lions because that's the one team that always is guaranteed to play on Thanksgiving, and they just seem to have bad luck whenever it comes to playing Thanksgiving in their home stadium. So the final score on this one would be 29-22 in favor of the Packers. With the victory, the Packers are now just one game below 500, sitting at 5-6. And despite the loss, the Lions are still atop of that NFC North division, sitting at 8-3. Our next matchup takes place in Dallas, where we have the host Cowboys, and they're taking on the Washington Commanders. So I will be pulling up those teams' logos here in just a moment. Now, I just want to give everyone a heads up if you're tuning in that this is an older football game that I have loaded. So you do have the Washington. I'm not going to say it because I don't want any haters. This is their former name. Obviously, they were this team, then they were the football team, and now they are the Commanders. So this is what the team was known for decades and decades and decades. So I did predict that the Cowboys would get the victory in this one. 45-10 would be the final score in this matchup. With the victory, the Cowboys are now sitting at 8-3, and with the loss, the Commanders are now 4 games below 500, sitting at 4-8. All right, so the last matchup that took place on Thursday was in the NFC West between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. So I should pull up their logos here in just a moment. So I did predict that the 49ers would get the victory, and they got a massive win. They won by 18 points. 31-13 would be the final score in this one. With the victory, the 49ers are still atop of that NFC West division at 8-3, and with the loss, the Seahawks are sitting at 6-5. All right, now for the first ever Black Friday game. It took place in the AFC East between the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. The one thing I liked about the scheduling for this particular week is that there were a lot of divisional matchups, so that was a huge thing, at least from my perspective. I did predict that Miami would get the victory, and they did. They won by 21 points. 34-13 is the final score. With the victory, the Dolphins are still atop of that AFC East, sitting at 8-3. And with the loss, it's looking like the playoffs are going to be very bleak for the New York Jets. They are now sitting at 4-7. On to the Sunday matchups. And we're heading into the NFC South, where we have the host team in the Atlanta Falcons, and they're playing host to the New Orleans Saints. So both these teams have been playing very inconsistently, to say the least. I just took a wild shot in the dark. I thought maybe the Saints would be able to pull this one off, but unfortunately they were not able to. The Falcons got a big win. 24-15 is the final score in this matchup. Both these teams are now sitting at 5-6, and as I said in my preview, I feel like this is going to be the weakest division in the NFC, and I would not be surprised if, unless one of these two teams happens to go on a 3 or 4 game winning streak, I would not be surprised if the winner of this division, just like last year, is below 500 when the season is all said and done. Our next matchup takes place in Cincinnati, where we have the Bengals, and they're playing host against their division foes, in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I did predict that Pittsburgh would get the victory. It was a close contest, and it was a low-scoring affair to say the least. 16-10 would be the final score from Ohio. The Steelers are now sitting at 7-4, pretty comfortable to say the least. And with the loss, the Bengals have now dropped below 500. They are sitting at 5-6. I don't want to say that the playoffs are looking bleak for the Bengals, but when you lose your starting quarterback, it certainly doesn't help. The next matchup takes place in the AFC South, where we have the Houston Texans, and they were playing host against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I did predict that Houston would get the victory only because I thought I really believe in CJ Stroud. If I'm going to be honest with you, he is their quarterback to the future, their franchise quarterback, to say the least. But unfortunately, they were not able to tie things up late because they just missed a field goal at the end of the game, which could have forced the game to go to overtime, and who knows what had happened or could have happened in the extra frame. So with the victory, the Jaguars are now 2 games above the Texans in the AFC South standings. They are sitting at 8-3, and despite the loss, the Texans are still in a playoff hunt in a wildcard position, sitting at 6-5. All right, our next matchup is a interconference one. The Indianapolis Colts, they were playing host to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I did predict that the Colts would prevail, and they sure did. 27-20 would be the final score in this one. With the victory, the Colts are now above 500, sitting at 6-5, and they are now looking in. They're sitting in a playoff position in a wild card spot, which no one would have guessed, not even myself, especially after Quentin Richardson went down. They have now turned to Gardner Minshew, but I mean, you got to take a win whenever you can. And with the loss, the Buccaneers have now fallen to 3 games below 500. They're sitting at 4-7. But I don't want to say that all is lost because when I previewed the Saints and the Falcons, those teams are just a game above them in the standings. So if the Bucs happen to win next week and both the Falcons and the Saints lose, there could be like a 3-way tie for first in that NFC South, which is very weak to say the least. Our next matchup takes place in New York. Yet another interconference matchup between the Giants and the Patriots. Now, maybe if this happened 10 years ago, this would have been more exciting because you would have had your Brady, you would have had your Manning play against each other. But both those guys have long since retired. So both these teams are struggling, to say the least. And obviously for the Giants, losing Daniel Jones for the remainder of the season, there goes your starting quarterback, your franchise quarterback. So at this point, I feel like the Giants are just playing for pride. 10-7 would be the final in this one. I did predict the Giants would get the victory, but I didn't think it would be a 10-7 final. So with the win, the Giants are still 4 games below 500. Again, playoffs probably not likely to even happen in the state of New York. And with the loss, the Patriots have now dropped to 2-9. So it just goes to show that, and I've said this, I'm going to sound like a broken record, that when obviously the Patriots had Brady, Belichick needed Brady more than Brady needed Belichick, because Brady obviously went on to win a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, and the Patriots have just not been themselves since 12 has left that city. Our next matchup takes place in Tennessee, where we have the Titans, and they are playing host against the Carolina Panthers. I did predict that the Titans would get the victory in this one, only because the Panthers are the worst team in the league. 17-10 would be the final score in this one. Even though the Titans won, they are still 3 games below 500. They are sitting at 4-7. So unless they go on like a 5 or 6 game winning streak, it's looking very bleak for the Titans to make the postseason. And speaking of the playoffs, well, the Panthers have now been officially eliminated after this loss. They are sitting at 1-10. The big news for Carolina is they have parted ways with Frank Reich, who was their head coach. And just like with a lot of teams, if your team is struggling, the coach is always the scapegoat and always seems to be the one who gets the worst of the punishments. Okay, now we're going to go back to some divisional matchups. The next one takes place in Carolina, it's not Carolina, I apologize, Arizona, and they were the Cardinals. They were playing host to the Los Angeles Rams. For some reason, I thought that it would be a slim chance that Kyler Murray and company would be able to pull off a victory in this one, but they were not. They got blown out. They lost by 23 points. 37-14 was the final score in this one. Matthew Stafford looking like an old self, and that's exactly what the Rams need if they want to have any chance of making a playoff push. So with the victory, the Rams are now sitting at 5-6, and with the loss, the Cardinals are sitting at 2-10. I feel like they were probably mathematically eliminated as well. Again, unless everybody else in the NFC just craps the bed and the Cardinals win out the next 5 games, it's looking very bleak. And maybe next year. All right, now we're off to the AFC West, where we have the host Las Vegas Raiders, and they were playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. So you should see the teams and their logos on your screen right away. I did predict that Kansas City would get the victory, and they won by 14 points. 31-17 would be the final score in this one. So the Chiefs are looking pretty decent, if I'm going to be completely honest. And I would not be surprised if yet again they won another AFC West crown. It's going to take a lot for anybody else to try to catch up to them, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. So my phone just locked, so I just got to check the scores. I believe the Chiefs are sitting at 8-3, and with the loss, I feel that the Raiders are now 6-7. But I just have to double check here, like I said, my phone just locked. 5-7. I do apologize. So yeah, so the Chiefs are 8-3, the Raiders are 5-7. Okay, now will it let me scroll? That's the big question. Okay, so now I'll take a look at our next matchup, which was in Philadelphia, where we had the Eagles, and they were playing host to the Buffalo Bills. So you should see the team's logos. There they are. So 37-34 would be the final in this one. It would take overtime to decide the winner. I believe the Bills got a field goal in overtime, so they were up 34-31 at that point. And then the Eagles just drove down the field, got a touchdown from Jalen Hurts, who ran the ball into the end zone. Game over at that point. So for the Eagles, again, the best team in the league, 10-1 is where they stand after this one. And with the loss, the Bills are now sitting at 6-6. I will say this about the Bills is that the one thing with them with this season, especially this season, is that inconsistency has been consistent. I mean, they win one, they lose one, they win one, they lose one, they win one, they lose one. That does not help, especially if you're trying to make a push for the postseason. I think it's going to be tough for them to even catch the Dolphins in that division. If I'm going to be completely blunt and honest with you, I know we're only in week 12, but I think that the Dolphins have an easier schedule moving forward to claim that AFC East crown than the Bills do. If I'm not mistaken, the Bills are coming into a bye week in week 13, and if the Dolphins happen to win in week 13, then again you're like 3 games below them in the standings, and good luck going on a 4 or 5 game winning streak just to try to catch up to them and get ahead of them in the standings. So for the Bills, you have to be thinking if we're going to be doing a playoff push, it's going to be a wild card position at the best case scenario. All right, 2 more games on tap for week number 12. The first one takes place in Los Angeles, where we have the host Chargers, and they were taking on the Baltimore Ravens. I did predict that Baltimore would get the victory in this one, and it was a close contest. 20-10 would be the final score in this one. With the victory, the Ravens have now improved to 9-3. They are now officially the best team in the AFC. And with the loss, the Chargers have dropped to 4-7, 3 games below 500. So it's looking very bleak for the Chargers if they want to try and make a playoff push. And our last matchup takes place on Monday night, where we have 2 teams from the NFC North who took the field in Minnesota, where we have the Vikings, and they're playing host to the Chicago Bears. So the teams should appear on your screen right away. It was an ugly game to say the least, if I'm going to be honest with you. The Bears got a 12-10 victory in this matchup. With that, the Bears are sitting at 4-8. They're only 2 games behind the Vikings. And who would have guessed after the Vikings had such a hot start that they had a poor start, but then they started rolling. I think they had like 4 or 5 wins in a row, and now they've lost 2 straight games. They are now sitting at 6-6. That takes care of my Week 12 recap. I will take a look at my overall record. So with my picks for this week, I got 11 correct, 5 incorrect. That now pushes my overall record to 101-59. So pretty darn good so far. As always, if you're new to this channel, I do videos on the daily. I will have my Week 13 preview tomorrow, so you can all have that to look forward to when that is uploaded. Thank you all again for tuning in. If you're new to this channel, please feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative at the same time. And as always, take care.